long before they were nearly legendary, long before kingdoms trembled and time itself begged for a reset. There were the 4 horsemen and a priest. This is not their origin story. That would require too much dignity. This is the tale of what happened when destiny or a particularly cruel dungeon master handed them a quest so vital, so noble, so world-saving, it can't be described in one book. Welcome to the world of magic, madness, time travel, taverns, and tragically misguided heroism. Welcome to the Tower of Darkness. As the party drudged their way down a seemingly endless path, they began to see the tips of the castle's towers above the trees, and it seemed that they all turned the drudge into a horse trot in perfect synchronicity. It was clear by the expressions on their faces that they were all growing more curious with each step, why the king had sent for them. I'm sure also that anyone that knows this group of bar brawlers would be curious also. Heck, just 6 hours ago, they nearly destroyed a nearby pub and are probably still fighting off a hangover, which would explain their walk, which, as I mentioned earlier, was a drudge, and why the pub was still nearby after 6 hours. By now, you're probably wondering why the heck anyone, let alone a king, would summon a group like this. Well, maybe the following will help. I present to you, as they prefer to be called, the 4 horsemen and a priest. First, heading the group. Down the path is Chuck the Destroyer, a name he rightfully deserves. Chuck is not the actual leader of the group, but he is very intimidating and most everyone just follows him. No one is quite sure just where Chuck is from, but some think he came from the northern lands and was brought up by a pack of hill giants, which seems quite odd for someone only 5 feet 9 tall to be associated with giants. Although he is short, he is quite strong for a human weighing in at 210 pounds. The only major flaw that Chuck has is his lack of common sense. He is a firm believer that the sword is mightier than anything, and that what's mine is mine and what's yours is mine. Chuck's attire is typical for your average bandit, except his is a little more tattered than you would see on a bandit. One of his prized possessions is a gold medallion around his neck, made by the hill giants for Chuck. It is a very crudely looking gold disc with a C gouged in it. In his left hand is a battered shield about half the size of himself. It is quite evident that many battles were fought with this shield, as it has many dents, creases and holes garnished with blotches of bloodstains. In Chuck's right hand is a great sword almost as tall as him. This particular sword is Chuck's most treasured possession and happens to be a family heirloom, but not from Chuck's family. It has some magical powers, most unknown to Chuck except for one, the yearning to be worshipped. The blade of the sword has many battle scars and has a faint tint of red color to it. Chuck does not carry a sheath for the sword, as he believes that a sword should never be put away, but always in hand, ready to shred an opponent. To Chuck's right, and about half a stride behind is CV, Slitthroat, as he prefers to be called, dressed in a faded leather breastplate, loosely fitting pants, boots that appear to be of the elven kind, and a black hooded cape with a few rips and frayed edges. He is a member of the Thieves' Guild, although now not too many accept him as a member because of his tendency to borrow things from others, which the other members of the group are well aware of, but has started to grow old to CV, especially since the last time he tried to steal something from Paul, who I will get to in a moment, and Chuck. He couldn't move his fingers for a week. CV and Chuck are friends, but sometimes their greed turns them into raging enemies. Such was the case when Chuck first acquired his sword. Its yearning to be worshipped, power sort of went to Chuck's head, and he tried to make CV kneel and kiss his feet. Well, all hell broke loose, and well, let's just say it got pretty ugly. Following CV is Paul, or as Chuck and CV refer to him, Paul the Incompetent. Paul is one beast of a man, but what do you expect for someone who is half ogre, a beauty queen? Paul is far from that. He is also just as stupid as he is ugly. The only thing he has going for him is his ability to fight and his incredible strength, mostly because of his girdle of giant strength. But even without that, he is still stronger than Chuck. But don't tell Chuck that. About the only piece of clothing on Paul is his girdle, and that doesn't even fit him quite right. He had to add a good 8 inches of rope to the belt to get it around his waist. The only other piece of clothing on him is a pair of beaten leather boots size 22. For a weapon, Paul is wielding a massive wooden club, better described as a tree trunk with an 8-inch dragon tooth driven in near the end. You might think that Paul is a real hard ass like Chuck, but actually he is very kind to people he knows, especially to Father Anki. Father Anki is sort of like Paul's own dad, the way he treats him. It was Anki who took Paul under his wings and adopted him into the group after they rescued him from a prison camp. Next, we have Anki, who is the cleric priest of the group. He is dressed in a nicely polished gold breastplate armor with sleeves of chainmail, clean blue pants with polished black boots, and a fishbowl-like helmet with haircut to match with a cross on top. Anki is a very clean-cut man with high morals and tries to keep his faith to the Lord as much as possible, which can be very difficult at times, considering the group he is with. Alpha 1K is one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet. He is considered a nerd by CV, and Chuck refers to him as Father Donkey. Anki's main purpose in the group is healing the wounded, which occurs quite often. One of Anki's other useful skills is the ability to turn the undead. Chuck and CV believe that this ability is due to Anki's ugly face, but is actually a power given to all lawful good clerics. Anki is one of the original members of the group, along with Chuck and CV. The three originally met when they responded to King Rosnarson's request to recover his lost sword and return it to him. This is where Chuck acquired his sword, and as you can see, they still haven't returned it. Since then, the three have traveled together, hiding from Rosnarson's militia. Maybe this is why Anki is still in the group. Although he is a cleric, he is still wanted by the Rosnarsson militia for aiding and embedding fugitives. Next, I introduce to you Mesmikok. I think his name used to be Mesarak, but the rest of the group voted on this one. Mesmikok is fairly young for being half-elf, and has much to learn in the art of wizardry. Although he does know some powerful spells, he still has a ways to go. The rest of the group, except for Anki, do not realize how difficult it is to cast a spell since they are not spellcasters, and frequently give Mesmikok shit for screwing up, although quite often he does deserve it because he does some stupid things on occasion. One time the party was engaged in hand-to-hand combat and Mesmikok thought he'd be really cool and blast M with a fireball. Sure, he killed the orcs all right, but also gave the rest of the group first and second degree burns as well, and that nearly cost him his life. Mesmikok's attire looks like the outfit that the magician from Cookie Crisp cereal has. It consists of a dark blue robe, pointed cone-shaped hat, and black boots. The hat and robe have yellow moons and stars painted all over them, which was done by Chuck and CV one night while he was asleep. Mesmikok joined the group just a few months ago. While the group was venturing through a town, the young wizard rushed up to them and begged them to let him join the group. Chuck immediately said no, but Mez tagged along and begged the crap out of everyone until finally, Chuck said that he could join as long as he gave Hemelofis money, and he had to carry everything of Chuck's, except of course his sword and shield. Anki pleaded with Chuck to just let him join freely, but that did little good except to give Anki a black eye. There is one more character in the group whom I have not mentioned yet, and you may find him to be the most interesting of them all. Strapped to Paul's back is a burlap sack about the size of a grocery bag. Protruding out of the top is what appears to be the head of a halfling, except that this one has a huge mouth with razor-sharp fangs sticking out. If you were to remove him out of the bag, you would find that he is nothing more than a head attached to a legless and armless torso, about the only thing that comes out of the halfling's mouth, besides wads of slobber, are grunts, groans and growls. He was rescued out of a prison by the group and is sort of their mascot now. But he does have a vital method of attack, as you will see later. He has no real name as far as the group knows, and they just refer to him as Halfling in a bag. Or, when they're mad at him, Trash in a bag. Either one doesn't really matter, since he can't talk or walk anyway. Well, now that I have told you about this band of idiots, let's see where they're at now. As they approached the castle doors, Anki noticed 2 guards poised on either side of the door. When they approached the guards, Anki made sure he spoke to the guards first and not take a chance of Chuck and or CV starting a fight. "Is your business here?" asked one of the guards. "What the?" Chuck blurted, but was quickly cut off. "By Anki, we come on a summons from the king." The guard made a motion to the other one, and he went inside the castle. "He will verify this. Please wait." Chuck, being the patient fellow that he is, began mumbling under his breath, "What a crock." I'm going to kill the both of them, and you, too, you little pipsqueak, he yelled at Mez, as Mez was elbowing Chuck, trying to shut him up. Within moments, the guard returned, whispered something to the other, and took his position on the other side of the door. You may pass. The king is awaiting in the eating room, fourth door on the right. As the party walked in, Chuck and Sevie fell to the end of the line, and as they walked past the guards, they both flipped them the finger in perfect synchronicity and laughed all the way down the hall. Alert the others to keep an eye out for those two. I have a feeling we might see some trouble. As the group approached the dining room, Paul must have caught a whiff of food because he started to slobber on himself. Get that pig a bib, said CV. Don't worry, Paul. There will be plenty to eat in a few minutes, Onky said, patting Paul on the back. Paul gave a happy-sounding grunt. When they reached the dining room doors, they stopped and looked at each other with uncertainty. Well, what the hell are we waiting for? I'm hungry, let's go and eat, CV yelled, as he swung open the doors. A sudden hush fell over the room as the group entered. Everyone was staring at them with a certain look of disgust on their faces. Got a problem? Chuck snapped at a woman dressed extensively with gold, jewels, and silk. The woman dropped the food she was holding, as if suddenly paralyzed, and shook her head. Onky, noticing the king seated at the head of the table, bowed and said, We have come at your request, sire. The king rose and said, Yes, thank you for coming. Please join us, and we will discuss business. As the group headed for the table, Paul unstrapped Halfling in a bag from his back and set him down in the corner as everyone at the table looked at him in disgust. Rubbard, dub, pass down the grub, CV said, pointing to a guest. The man paused for a minute, looking dazed. What are you, deaf? Chuck exclaimed at him as he stuck the end of his sword into a large chicken and hoisted the whole bird onto his plate. Hey guys, watch this. I'll levitate that bowl of soup over there and bring it over to me, piped Mez, but no one was listening. But as the bowl of soup started to rise off the table, everyone got quiet and watched. Holy crap, the little quizzer is actually doing something right, said CV, just as he finished saying that the bowl suddenly splashed soup down the front of a woman's dress. All right, a wet t-shirt contest, yelled Chuck, who began whistling and waving money in the air.
That will be enough horseplay, yelled the king. A sudden silence fell over the room. Even Chuck fell quiet and gave the king his full attention. Either we talk business now, or you and your friends can leave, the king said to Onky. Of course, your highness, said Onky, lowering his head in respect to the king. What a candy ass. Chuck whispered to CV. As you may or may not know, I happen to be one of the wealthiest kings. Chuck's eyes are now bulging out of his head. In all the land, my beloved daughter was taken captive by some man. He called himself a time traveler. What he meant by that I have no idea, but anyway, I overheard his henchmen refer to him as Lord Joe Tap. Very odd name, but nonetheless, he is the one who stole my daughter. And you want us to find this Lord Tap and retrieve your daughter? Asked Onky. Is she hot? Whispered CV to Chuck, as they both giggled quietly. Giving Chuck and CV a scowl, the king responded with finding this Lord Joe Tap is only the half of it. My scouts have reported that he has imprisoned my daughter at the Tower of Darkness. The Tower of Darkness? Repeated Onky. Yes. This tower is guarded by the mighty Colossus, 20 times taller and stronger than the ordinary man. Very dangerous, the king responded, lowering his head. Dead meat, stated Chuck, looking over his sword. No problem, added CV, nodding to Chuck. Paul has now devoured 2 whole chickens during this conversation. Well, I'm glad you feel so confident, the king replied, for I am willing to reward you all very handsomely, if you succeed. Riches do not matter in this situation, sire. We will be glad to help you out, stated Onky. Speak for yourself, loser. CV snapped at Onky. What do we get? Chuck said to the king, rubbing his hands together. Your reward will be based on my daughter's well-being, and if you can succeed in bringing me this Lord Joe Tap's head, the king exclaimed. Paul lets out a nice, long, disgusting belch. Everyone stared down the table at him. He responded only by patting his stomach and making a happy grunt sound. We accept your mission, your highness, said Onky, lowering his head in respect to the king. Yeah, piece of cake, stated Chuck, raising one hand and giving a thumbs up. Yeah, all I gotta do is cast one spell on that Colossus thing and he'll be begging for mercy, stated Mez, crossing his arms and nodding his head in total agreement with himself. You can't even levitate a bowl of soup. How you plan on scaring off a colossus, you loser? CV snapped back at Maz. Enough you guys, we've got a lot in front of us, so we'd better get going. Paul, pick up Halfling in a bag on your way out, said Anki, glaring at Chuck and CV, then looking at Paul, pointing to Halfling, who, at this point, is laying asleep in a corner surrounded by chicken bones, miscellaneous chunks of food and a huge puddle of slobber. Yes, your highness, yelled CV sarcastically, bowing to Anki. Paul, better pick up Halfling before King Donkey has us thrown into the dungeon, said CV, now looking at Paul laughing. Don't worry, sire, I'll make sure this is carried out with the utmost professionalism, Anki said to the king, shielding his mouth from the others with his hand. I certainly hope so, or it will be your heads the next group of bounty hunters will be after. The king calmly said back to Anki. Come on, let's go. I want to get this thing over with so I can get back here and collect my loot, Chuck said firmly, dragging Mez through the doorway by his collar on his robe. Seth followed suit, grabbing a chicken leg on his way out and motioning to Paul to follow. Paul got up, picked up Halfling who was dripping wet from slobber, made a disgusting-sounding grunt, and slung Halfling over his shoulder and headed out. Well, sire, we shall return with your daughter, and the head of this tap character, Anki said to the king as he headed out the door. From where the king was sitting, he could hear Chuck and CV arguing in the hallway over who would get what % of the reward. My God, what have I done? The king asked himself, shaking his head. I almost wish, for my daughter's sake, that they don't find her.